She came storming across my yard before I even knew her name, pointing straight at my dock and screaming, "That belongs to the community, not you." First 3 minutes of living at my new cabin. I was already being threatened with $50 a day fines for not surrendering the pier I had just paid cash for. By the time she was done ranting, half the neighborhood had turned their backs on me, and I was left standing there wondering if I'd just made the dumbest decision of my life. My name's Derek Miller. 38, burned out from managing logistics in a shipping company desperate for quiet after years of corporate hell. The lakeside cabin at Lake Harrison seemed perfect weathered cedar siding, a stone fireplace, and most importantly, a wooden pier stretching 50 feet into crystal clear water. That pier was the reason I signed so quickly. I wanted mornings of fishing, evenings of peace. Instead, my very first sunrise came with a war. Her name was Victoria Hale. Blonde hair, stiff as a helmet clipboard, clutched like it was a sword. Behind her strutted Clark Benson, self-styled enforcement officer, smug face, scribbling on a notepad like he was issuing arrest warrants. They marched down my pier as if it were their personal property, then up my lawn. Victoria didn't introduce herself politely. She declared herself president of the Lakeview Shores HOA and announced flat out that my pier was community property. According to her, I needed to remove the private pier sign and let her sell seasonal passes at $200 a head. Clark chimed in with his own threat. Non-compliance meant daily fines doubling every week. I stared at them, still wearing my moving clothes, sweat soaking my shirt. I asked a simple question. "Do you have a deed proving this pier is yours?" Victoria shuffled photocopied pages, blurry to the point of nonsense. No seals, no signatures. Just paper shields for her entitlement. I pulled out my phone and started recording. That made them squirm, their confidence cracking, and they retreated in a tight cluster, whispering as they left my dock. The next morning, 5:30 a.m., Clark was pounding on my door like a cop with a warrant. I cracked it open to find him in full business attire, tie and polished shoes, waving papers in my face. He shoved them into my hand, citations printed in cheap clip art borders. Violations included unauthorized signage because of my dock's private sign, failure to register watercraft access equipment, whatever that meant, and non-compliance with Marina integration protocols, which sounded like pure fiction. Each carried a $50 daily fine. He said they'd double every week. By then, my neighbors were treating me like a pariah. The woman across the street stopped waving. The old man, who'd introduced himself 2 days earlier, wouldn't make eye contact. Conversations hushed when I walked by. Victoria had already spread her poison. I'd barely unpacked and already felt like the villain in someone else's story. It got worse. One morning, I found my truck tires slashed, deliberate knife cuts both sides. Later that week, a note slid under my door. Sell or regret it. Last warning. No signature. Just block letters. My stomach dropped. For the first time, I asked myself if I should just give up. Maybe sell the place, swallow the loss, escape this nightmare before it consumed me. I walked the cabin that night, checking locks, curtains pulled tight, feeling ridiculous and yet terrified. I'd wanted peace and got a cold war. But then I remembered the brass key. The previous owner, Frank Morrison, had handed it to me at closing with a strange smile. "You'll figure out what it opens." I hadn't thought much of it. Until now. I started digging. County maps online showed a boundary line that didn't match what Victoria claimed. Then I found an old boundary marker hidden in tall grass near the water, rusty but solid, carved with the same symbols as the brass key. Anchor, compass, arrow. Proof that this land had history long before the HOA existed. Harold Green, an older neighbor, confirmed that Victoria had been twisting property lines for years, bullying owners into surrendering private docks, charging fees, building her little empire. Frank, he told me, had fought her once and won quietly, but the board never forgave him. That was the spark I needed. Instead of hiding, I invited neighbors to an open dock barbecue. I strung lights along the pier, set up a grill, laid out snacks. Megan Price, a single mom with 2 kids, showed up first. Her kids had never been on a dock. HOA rules kept them away. The joy on their faces as they leaned over the rail was pure and real. Soon, 20 people were gathered laughing, telling stories about HOA harassment. Megan stood on my dock, voice carrying across the water. "Do not turn our Marina into an ATM machine." Applause roared. For the first time, I saw the tide turning. Of course, Victoria struck back. She called a tribunal at the clubhouse, turned it into a public trial. She painted me as a troublemaker, twisting every interaction into proof of my hostility. Clark paraded fake safety reports claiming my pier was a hazard. They threatened lawsuits. But when they demanded I sign over access, I unfolded my ACE original deeds from the 70s, sealed and notarized, proving I had exclusive easement rights. When I asked Victoria for their deed, she stammered. Clark, panicking, blurted, "You said no one would find those folders." The room gasped. Their bluff cracked wide open. But Victoria wasn't done. She staged one final showdown, an emergency meeting on my pier itself. Residents crowded the dock at sunset, golden light glinting on the water. Victoria arrived with her board, Clark at her side, and a hired lawyer carrying a thick folder. They claimed maritime regulations overrode my rights. They gave me 5 minutes to sign their access agreement. I pretended to study their papers, then asked one simple question. "Does your claim include the submerged land beneath this pier?" The lawyer hesitated, then admitted, "No. Surface rights only." That was my moment. I pulled out a sealed envelope, the one everyone had seen me carry before. Inside was the bombshell. Frank Morrison hadn't just sold me the cabin. He'd sold me the entire marina. Every slip, every dock, every access point. The crowd erupted in whispers. I laid out the insurance contracts too, showing that the HOA had been paying me unknowingly as a tenant organization since the day I closed. Megan shouted, "You lied to us." Harold backed her, nodding, confirming what he'd always suspected. A board member threw down their badge and walked away. Residents pulled out phones, live streaming. Clark sputtered nonsense about forgeries. People laughed in his face. The lawyer, realizing the truth, packed up and left. Victoria stood frozen pale while her empire collapsed under the weight of her lies. That was it. The crowd wasn't hers anymore. It was over. Sometimes standing your ground means uncovering the truth others tried to bury.